Hey guys, so today I want to talk to you about the Magic cards that I hate playing against the most. So these are the cards that I would log in for the day to play some Magic, and I would lose to this instantly as soon as I logged in, and I would just log out for the day because I was so frustrated and I didn't want to face these cards all day long. So these cards are not necessarily cards that are too good for the game, just cards that personally I hate playing against. In fact, I'm purposefully not using any cards that have been banned ever in the game, currently or in the past, because I feel like if they were banned, that's the company acknowledging that the card was too good. So of course no one wants to play against those cards. Nobody wants to lose to Oko and stuff like that. So this is not in any particular order. This is not a top 10 list. It's just a list of the cards that I personally can't stand and why I can't stand playing against them. Some of these cards I do think are probably too good and maybe could be banned, but they haven't been yet. So anyways, let's jump into the cards. These are the cards that I can't stand playing against. So the first card that I can't stand playing against is Haughty Djinn. So the way this deck works is they play a bunch of cheap spells in the early game, and then when they have 4 mana available, they play the Haughty Djinn and keep 1 mana available. Then if you try to kill the Djinn, they have cards like Slip Out the Back or Counter Spells, which have now been reduced in cost by the Djinn's other ability, and you're basically just locked out of the game. Unless you have multiple removal spells that you can use, they can now just continuously protect the Djinn while hitting you in the air over and over again, and the Djinn gets bigger every time a spell gets put into the graveyard. So oftentimes, if you don't have the right cards in your hand, you pretty much just lose on turn 4 and are locked out of the game. It's a very frustrating feeling, and I've always hated this card. Up next is Embercleave, and when I think back to all my time playing Magic, I don't think I've been killed more by a card than I have Embercleave. This card was so brutal and so fast, and it can kill you on like turn 4 so easily. Sometimes you think you're winning a game, and then this thing comes down and it just deals like 14 damage in a turn. I personally thought this card was going to get banned when it was in Standard, but somehow it never did. But it was just so explosive, and I hated playing against this card. After that, we have Sunfall, and really any of the board wipe cards that exile all creatures I can't stand. And the reason why is because the way that the aggro versus control matchup generally works is the aggro player tries to get on board fast and kill the control player before they can wipe their board and stabilize and then try to come back. So as the aggressive player, you have different ways you can build your deck. You can just play the best quality creatures, such as a card like Fleece Mainline, which is a 2 mana 3/3 with 2 positive abilities, and hope that you can kill your opponent before they wipe your board. Or there's other cards you can play like Scrap Heap Scrounger, which is a 2 mana for a 3/2 that can't block and has no other positive ability except for that it can come back from the graveyard. So you sacrifice a bit of power to play a card like this over something like Fleece Mainline, so that when your opponent wipes the board, you have a better chance of recovering and rebuilding. The problem is, like I said before, instead of printing cards like Wrath of God that just destroy all creatures so you can actually use this ability to bring your creatures back, they keep printing these board wipes that exile all creatures, making cards like Scrap Heap Scrounger completely pointless, because the card is exiled and you can't bring it back from the graveyard. So I don't understand why they don't just print destroy all creature board wipes and stop making it exile, but it's always frustrated me, and it makes so many cards unplayable. After that, I have Spreading Seas. This card may not look good when you first read it, but this is such a brutal card to lose against. It's just a 2 mana enchantment that comes in, draws you a card, and turns a land into an island. So let me give you an example of the kind of things this card used to do, and I've lost games like this before. Let's say you're playing a red-white aggro deck, and your opening hand is Boros Elite, Swiftblade Vindicator, Tajik Legion's Edge, Aurelia Exemplar of Justice, 1 Plains, and 2 Mountains. This is like the dream hand for this deck. Nobody would mulligan this hand. It's exactly what you want to see. So your opponent goes first and plays their land, then you go and you play your Boros Elite. Then on your opponent's second turn, they Spreading Seas your Plains. Now, if you don't draw another white mana source over the next few turns, you're literally locked out of the game. You can't play any more of your hand, and you've just lost the game. This has happened to me so many times, where I think I have a great hand, and then Spreading Seas comes at the wrong time, and just locks you out of the game. There's no worse feeling than losing to an uncommon 2 mana enchantment, and feeling so helpless against it. So that's on the list. Up next is Thalia, Guardian of Thraben, and this one isn't so bad. I play this card all the time, but there's been so many times where I have been excited to build a new deck that plays a bunch of spells, maybe like a ramp deck, and I forget about this card until I enter a match and realize that all my cards are spells, and the opponent plays this thing on turn 2. Now my entire deck costs an extra mana, and because they're playing an aggressive deck, you can never catch back up. So just an extremely frustrating card if you're not prepared for it. Up next is Rafine, Scheming Seer, and this one is similar to Hadijin in how it operates, in that if it isn't answered right away, it just snowballs out of control and gets harder and harder to deal with the longer the game goes on. Rafine in particular draws you a bunch of cards, so the longer it lives, the more they can dig through their deck and find things to protect the Rafine. And that Ward 1 ability may not seem like much, but making your ability to kill this card cost more mana is very good and extremely frustrating. And this card, I'm surprised, actually never got banned. After that, we have Shieldred the Apocalypse, and I actually don't think this card is too good, but the fact that it just dies to all removal, and also the fact that it doesn't have a enters the battlefield ability, meaning if your opponent plays it and you have the answer to kill it, they just get nothing out of it, makes the card not too overpowered, but still frustrating to play against. Again, it's one of these cards where if you don't have the ability to kill it right away, it just drains you out of the game so fast. But the thing I actually hate about this card the most is the effect that it's had on the format in general, in that there's so many 4-mana cards that I would love to play, but you just can't because they can't compete with Shieldred. For example, I love the card Edgar Charmed Groom, and I would love to play it more, but playing a 4-mana 4/4 in a world where a 4-mana 4/5 is the best card in the format just doesn't make sense. And I think if Shieldred was a 4-mana 4/4 instead of a 4/5, the card would probably still be okay and probably playable, but not so overpowered. Another example is a card like Stoke the Flames, which, when it was first printed, was really good in the format and played in a ton of decks, but now sees almost no play. And I think part of that is because it doesn't deal with Shieldred. So yeah, just a frustrating card to have around all the time. And lastly is basically all counter spells ever. I understand that counter spells are an important part of the ecosystem of the game, I suppose, but I've always hated counter spells. I think the fun of Magic is playing cards and having combat happen, and just stopping things from happening is not fun, I don't find. The one in particular that I think makes me the most angry is when I get spell pierced, mainly because I'm never expecting it. I'll think my opponent's tapped out, they'll have 1 mana available, and I'll think there's no way they have the spell pierce. And then I'll play my 7-mana spell and lose to a 1-mana counter spell. And while that's my own stupid fault, it just feels so frustrating. And there's no worse feeling than getting countered over and over and over again every single turn. I just don't find it fun, but I'm sure it's fun for the opponent. Anyways, those are all the cards that I can't stand playing against. I would love to know what cards you find frustrating to play against, so let me know in the comments what cards you can't stand playing against. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hello, thank you for making it to the end of the video. If you enjoyed this video, check out one of these ones next.